Good morning, vinyl community, crime community. Read out a chapter called The Bug Cashes In. You saw the trial? Now read the book and see the TV movie. We're going to blame it on, let's blame it on somebody we can get away with blaming it on. Let's blame it on the convict that ain't got no money. Let's blame it on somebody that ain't got no education. When Pelosi seen me, I was custom made for his ambitions. Manson to William Scanlon Murphy, 1993. When it comes to naming and shaming the creatures of the false Manson myth, it's been marketed to the public for 5 decades. The name Vincent Bugliosi stands at the top of the list in the class of his own. Perhaps the day will come when research into the Manson phenomenon can pour in its own rights without having to constantly differentiate the facts from the tales told by the district attorney. But as if of this writing, Bugliosi influenced the way Manson is perceived far outweighs any other factor. This can be illustrated by the fact that I've already been forced to mention Bugliosi 631 times in the course of our inquiry thus far. This present study has attempted to clear away the thick impasto of obscuration that becomes the Manson mirror. Most of the gunk that needed to be scrubbed away derives from Bugliosi's courtroom theories and his heroic portrait of them in the most famous work. I would eagerly wager that the survey was held to ask the proverbial man on the streets what they knew about Charles Manson. The answers would be all based on Bugliosi's created myth rather than anything remotely like the truth. As I suspected that this would be even so, even if our theatrical man on the street never read a word of Bugliosi's Helter Skelter, or either saw of the 2 made-for-TV docudramas based on the questionable source, since the media made the mistake of turning to Bugliosi so often as the undisputed Manson expert. The attorney's screwed opinions of Manson have soaked into the mass media's mind conception for sheer osmosis. If we are to understand how and why the Manson myth and the Helter Skelter story is based on what was created, we need to understand something of the enigmatic attorney while calculating imaginations created it. Helter Skelter in 1974, the best-selling true crime book in publishing history, in the veritable Bible of the orthodox Manson myth, we've already seen that the story is presented as far from being the true story of the Manson murders. The book's subtitle claims it to be, and yet it has become the standard source of information on Manson. Whether Bugliosi's antics in court, the heart of the cover-up, were performed by the behest of the mob, the Hollywood movie industry, the FBI, or all three, cannot be proven with absolute certainty. That the concealment of the truth which Bugliosi's helter-skelter scenario accomplished during the trial primarily served the interests of those parties is incontestable. As previously mentioned, Manson's informed opinion is that his prosecutor's main taskmaker was the branch of the mafia which Lino LaBianca worked with. But whatever orders from above drove Bugliosi to perform the courtroom cover-up, he carried out with the efficiency his continued capitalization on the crimes, as he won the case, had only one beneficiary, not truth, certainly not justice, if the insatiable political ambitions of Vincent Bugliosi himself. As Susan Atkins, who was also manipulated and discarded as a pawn in Bugliosi's career-making machinations, wrote in an unfinished documentary, The Myth of Helter Skelter, it may be cynical, but it has to be pointed out that Mr. Bugliosi's book about the crime was published just before he ran for Attorney General of California. Far from being cynical, that's just the plain truth of it. Every copy of Helter Skelter would have come with a Vincent Bugliosi attorney for Attorney General bumper sticker. Even before the media circus of the Tate LaBianca trial actually began, it's clear that Bugliosi already planned to commandeer the Manson case in his personal vehicle to political stardom. Helter Skelter was the first phase of his campaign. Anyone who could defeat an evil criminal mastermind like Manson could certainly be trusted to fight crime as Attorney General. As we will see, only Bugliosi's own destructive arrogance, and a few glimpses of his paranoid personal behavior, which were revealed to the public, prevented him from attaining his goal. Even some of Bugliosi's own legal associates were astounded and repelled by the shameless way Bugliosi grandstanded for the cameras during the trial. They saw only 7 squalid murders, which would never even have aroused public attention had not a semi-famous minor actress of Sharon Tate caliber be among the victims. But Bugliosi, from the beginning, hyped what he called the crime of the century as an event unprecedented in the history of murder. He portrayed the messy but by no means uncommon killings of some drug dealers into the phenomenon of great moral weight and even more physical significance. By doing so, Bugliosi created a grandstand enough for him to play the part of super prosecutor he cast himself in. Integral to the star drama of good versus evil, Bugliosi intended to enact a few fiendish enough to serve as a worthy adversary, one sufficiently loathsome to allow Bosi to come off as the brave, dragon-slaying knight he saw himself as. The real investigator of the crimes and the man who had done most of the killing was unavailable since he was still locked up in a Texas jail. And besides, Watson, the bland and clean-cut college athlete, would never do as a satanic mega villain that Bugliosi needed to fulfill. The Manson coup, on the other hand, looked and acted the part, but Manson as an accessory to the series of drug robberies which he was dragged into once the Cielo Drive's murders already happened also didn't fit Bugliosi's bill. By inventing a narrative of supernatural evil which featured Manson as a cult leader who cast a spell on the followers to kill in the name of an esoteric race war, Bugliosi had created a monstrosity formidable enough to allow its own ascent to fame and fortune. In his blind ambition, Bugliosi didn't only engineer his own rise to celebrity and political eligibility by convincing the jury and the watching world of the lie that Manson, who ordered nobody to kill or be killed over the weekend of August 8th and August 9th of 1969, he ordered nobody to kill or be killed, but actually commanded the murders. Bugliosi almost single-handedly created the basis for the Charles Manson cult that had never existed before. But that was a very risky game. Because of Bugliosi was cleanly aware not only of his largely responsible for the adversary's legendary celebrity, but Manson's own stubborn refusal to talk about the actual nature of the crimes is what kept Bugliosi's reputation intact for all these years. While Manson lambasted the DA as a liar, a mob stooge, a self-publicist, and an opportunist, he never really revealed in clear, unimpeachable terms how wrong the case Bugliosi presented in court and his book really was. And to date, of the other defendants, only Susan Atkins finally spoke out and clearly stated that the helter-skelter motive was a lie and with no bearing on the crimes she was convicted for. For whatever personal reason, she didn't take the extra step of revealing her firsthand knowledge of what Tex was really up to that long ago weekend. However, Bugliosi's undeserved reputation as a great legal mind and hetero to true crime fans doesn't only depend on the silence of criminals, it also relies on a great extent to the passive cooperation of these LAPD homicide detectives who watched Bugliosi pull off his great deception in court. Even though they knew much about the evidence had been suppressed and how much false testimony had been uttered to do so, one of the mysteries of the case has not been able to penetrate is why so many cops kept their mouths shut above and about what they knew even after Bugliosi accused them of incompetence and helter-skelter. The planning that went into Bugliosi's scheme to use the Manson trial as his stepping stone to political power was almost military in its efficiency. Bugliosi's ghostwriter, Kurt Gentry, who did most of the work for weaving Helter-Skelter's narrative together, was installed in a small room behind the courtroom through the trial. There he was fed a steady supply of facts, near facts, and utter fantasies that were ultimately melded into the Helter-Skelter product. Bugliosi's behavior at the trial must have been seen with this in mind. He was consciously performing the part he wanted his hired writer to depict, In this sense, from Bugliosi's self-aggrandizing perspective, he could say that the trial was conducted the way it was largely to assure that it would make for a dramatic and sellable book. When one interviewer asked Manson what he thought of Helter Skelter, he wrote of how many mercenary Bugliosi motives were and how significant the book was as the foundation stone for the profitable Manson industry to come. Helter Skelter was written well, names and dates were right. The DA won Helter Skelter reality for the people versus Manson and made $15.50 a copy 25 million times. And worldwide, 295, 17 million in movies and lots of money. 50 books written, and people don't realize the LA Times sold papers all over the world, equals hundreds of millions of dollars made in the US and the world, and the movies and the TV's been playing Charlie's Angels, Charlie's this and that, and it would take you 5 years to think through how much was made from one asshole, and the only money I got was $40 or $50. No lawyer, no rights, and 19 years in the hole. People have been misleading each other for years and years. The biggest part of what you believe is unreal. When the trial was over, Bugliosi took possession of the first draft manuscript Kurt Gentry had been preparing behind the courtroom and gave it its final shape. At one point in Helter Skelter's consumption, Bugliosi's friend, Hugh Hefner, let the lawyer hole up in a comfortable bunny hutch in the Playboy Mansion West. As a guest of Hef's hospitality, Bugliosi carried out his labors on the book. The patronage of the Playboy entertainment empire in connection with the making of Helter Skelter raises other questions about whose interest Bugliosi's magnum opus was indeed to serve. Detailed in the previous chapter, one can only wonder if Hefner's involvement as a guardian angel in the writing of Helter Skelter was in any way connected to Playboy's long history of supporting Polanski's career. Tangential to Playboy Bugliosi-Polanski connection and how it came to figure in the mechanics of the cover-up of the fact that Hefner from the beginning of his career was dogged by rumors of mafia involvement, which of course he angrily denied. When Hefner opened his first Playboy club in mobbed-up Chicago, it was no secret that the syndicate had got a cut from every nightclub in that city. It's often been speculated that Hefner couldn't have operated his profitable club without paying off the Chicago mob or letting them in on the action. Such rumors obviously didn't bother Vincent Bugliosi, even when he was on the brink of running for California's Attorney General. And one would imagine that he was wanting to be careful about presenting a law-abiding image of the electorate. Friendship with Hugh Hefner wasn't the only thing Polanski and Bugliosi had in common. Polanski, as noted earlier, was born on August 18, 1933 in Paris. Vincent Torquato Bugliosi, whose fate would interweave with Polanski, was born exactly 1 year later. So Polanski and Bugliosi were born on the same day. On August 18, 1934, and Hef was born 1 year earlier. His hometown was Hibbing, Minnesota, where Bob Dylan also grew up. Like Lino LaBianca, who Manson so often links him to, Bugliosi's parents were Italian immigrants. Also like LaBianca's, Bugliosi's father owned a successful grocery market. Bugliosi attended Catholic school, excelling in tennis, and competitive young man became Minnesota's high school champion. His athletic skill won him a tennis scholarship at the University of Miami. He met Gail, his future wife, after moving to the greener pastures of California. Bugliosi graduated from UCLA Law School in 1964. Ever the overachiever and pillar of society, he was elected the president of the graduating class. After passing the bar, he entered the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. His star-making Perry Mason performance in the Manson show trial revealed that Bugliosi already had a knack for mixing show business and jurisprudence. He served as technical advisor as Dragnet star Jack Webb's TV series, My Father Cast That Show. The DA Bugliosi edited the script for 2 pilot films for the series, providing him valuable experience that later paid off in his exploitation of the Manson case into entertainment. Bugliosi's resolute business-busting persona owes more than a little to the morally upright character of Koploving Jack Webb, played on TV. Jack Webb was in my dad's office every day. After the Manson trial made him a nationally recognized public figure, Bugliosi prepared the release of Helter Skelter as a public-grabbing first step in the campaign for Attorney General. Many of the hippies also watched Bugliosi carry out character assassination on the counterculture during the Manson trial, assumed the aggressively square DA must be a rabid Nixonite Republican. In fact, the fervent JFK apologist was always a loyal liberal advocate of the Democratic Party. In keeping with the thin line between the entertainment and California's politics that Ronald Reagan and Arnold Schwarzenegger maneuvered so well, Bugliosi relied on his Hollywood friends as part of his crusade as Democratic aspirant to the Attorney General's office. The actor Robert Vaughn, who was cast in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. by Daddy, best known for his secret agent Napoleon Solo in the popular TV series The Man from U.N.C.L.E. My dad cast that when he was at MGM before he even went to Universal. Was recruited to stump for candidate Bugliosi. Despite his reputation as a legal eagle, supreme at the Manson trial earned for Bugliosi, the better financed Republican opponent outspent him and eventually defeated him. But there was another significant factor in Bugliosi's loss of the Attorney General post. He fought so hard for candidate Bugliosi's electoral performance was also badly damaged by an article that appeared in the Los Angeles Times on May 8th, 1974, which allowed fellow attorney George V. Denny, remember that name, George V. Denny, at one time Bruce Davis's attorney, described Bugliosi as a liar, a perjurer, a fabricator of false evidence, who a totally unfit for office. As of May 7th press conference, Denny also accused Bugliosi of lying to the police investigators or making hush money cover-up payments. Denny's allegations, although not directly connected to the prosecutorial of Manson, was suggested enough of the state of Bugliosi's moral probity and character that any serious student of the Manson phenomenon must at least consider them. The Denny's charges were originally brought to light during Bugliosi's first grab for political power in November of 1972. Only a few months after Manson's conviction, Bugliosi, then deputy DA, ran to unseat the incumbent Los Angeles district attorney, the chief county prosecutor. On November 3rd, 1972, the press conference was held. In Denny's words, to bring to the public's attention Bugliosi's misuse of the powers and resources of the district attorney's office when he was just a deputy DA. The implications of yet greater misuse and abuse, as if were to become the DA, were apparent. A Los Angeles couple, Rose and Herbert Weisel, inspired legal declarations against penalty of perjury, accused Bugliosi of harassing them with anonymous phone calls and mail. According to the charges made in the Weisel documents, Bugliosi was believed was in need of professional help from a psychiatrist, was convinced that Herbert Weisel, the milkman by trade, had had an affair with Bugliosi's wife and may have been the real father of the child. According to Rose Weisel's statement, Bugliosi's wife came by the Weisel home to apologize for the harassment. Mrs. Weisel testified that Mr. Bugliosi said, "I don't know, he's sick, he's got a mental problem." In pursuing this notion, the Weisels claimed Bugliosi had misused his attorney as deputy DA to obtain private information about the Weisels, including their personal telephone number and work address. Bugliosi became a nuisance to them. They asserted after he'd been given this information, Herbert Weisel stated, "It wasn't until sometime during the Manson trial that I happened to see Mr. Bugliosi on TV. I called my wife to show her the guy who had been harassing us, and it was only then that we discovered that he was a deputy district attorney." In June this year, after the primary elections, my wife and I discussed the fact that Mr. Bugliosi had become one of the two runoff candidates for DA based on what had happened to us when he was only a deputy and not the actual DA. We were scared of what would happen if he got into office. According to George Denny, Bugliosi had been appraised of the upcoming Weasel news conference before it occurred. Therefore, the night before the conference, he concocted a spurious story about the supposed $300 theft that occurred in his house, his suspicions about Weasel as the theft, and the contact with both Weasel and his attorney regarded these suspicions. In his document, The Vincent Bugliosi Story, Denry claims that the Weasels began pursuing legal action against Bugliosi. This was settled out of court when Bugliosi paid the couple $12,500. By then, the multi-millionaire author was not going to be unduly troubled by this loss of such a sum. Then he also described another case which became public knowledge due to the Herald Examiner article headline, Bugliosi, Accused of Assault. The young woman named Virginia Cardwell had been beaten and choked by the crusading DA during a particularly strenuous interrogation concerning an abortion Bugliosi insisted she should get. Cardwell claimed that she had been impregnated by Bugliosi during the brief affair. She said that Bugliosi had beaten her, but when she failed to abort the child with money he had provided for that purpose. After Cardwell went public with the incident, Bugliosi was alleged by Denny to have forced her to recant the charges. The notoriously litigious Bugliosi deafening silence in the face of this apparent gross defamation is remarkable. The Caldwell case was, Denny said, ultimately settled out of court. This was revealed in a May 9, 1974 article in the Evening Outlook, which stated that Bugliosi paid $5,000 to a former girlfriend to keep her from suing for civil damages over an assault that occurred in Santa Monica. A Beverly Hills attorney had charged. All of this negative publicity contributed to Bugliosi's loss of the election on June 4th, 1974. These fleeting glimpses of the man behind the mask of public rectitude did nothing to make the public wonder if the prosecution of Manson had been handled with similarly shady methods. But Denny revealed some details of the relatively unknown case more directly related to the Manson trial. The grand jury had indicted Bugliosi on these 3 counts of perjury. The charges were based largely on the testimony of Bugliosi's co-conspirator in the Tate LaBianca cases, Stephen R. Kay, and the limited but crucial testimony of reporter William Farr. The gravamen of the charged offenses that was Bugliosi's had twice lied to Manson's trial judge, Charles Older, and had also lied in the grand jury itself, in denying under oath that he had provided Farr with the transcript of the witness's testimony in violation of the court order. At Bugliosi's perjury trial in September and October of 74, instead of testifying that he had before the grand jury, Farr asserted that the newsman's privilege not to reveal his sources of information, unable to make one of the prior testimonies under the evidence code, and therefore unable to establish a prima facie case, the special prosecutor moved to dismiss the case, and no conviction, no acquittal, and no vindication. I believe that a simple comparison of the original police reports and the Cielo Waverly killings with the transcript suffices to provide that the DA suppressed unassailable evidence which pointed away from helter-skelter myth. Unfortunately, the anticlimactic procedure concerning the Farr document remains the only time the questions of prosecutorial perjury in the Manson trial has actually come to court. Out of the most frequent charges leveled against Bugliosi by his detractors, which has never been legally investigated, was summed up by Sandra Good. Bugliosi used the power of the district attorney, the money, the resources of the investigation he was able to coerce by making deals with them. They were people who testified for the prosecution, who had pending charges against them. Bugliosi said, "You say what we want you to say, or we'll drop your charges." People were paid. People were influenced. Women's babies were taken away from them. They took my child, meaning Sandra Good. They tried to use my child as leverage to get me to testify against Charlie. They took Susan Atkins' child, Zizo Zatfrak Lutz, away from her. They took Rosemary Bruner's child away from her. They used every trick in the book to get people to say what would fit with Bugliosi's scenario. Another kind of trial also shed light on Bugliosi's willingness to perpetuate the helter-skelter myth, marked it as a profitable entertainment. In 1986, a British TV network hired Bugliosi to participate in a fictional docudrama trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. Attorney Jerry Spence defended the fictional Oswald in this mock trial, and Bugliosi played the prosecutor. In the end, Bugliosi convicted the jury that Oswald had acted alone. The Oswald as lone nut theory was concocted in the part of to prevent the American public from learning of mafia involvement with the Kennedy administration. As also was identified, intended to divert attention from links between Jack Ruby, the man who killed the self-described Patsy Oswald, and the mob. After researching the case for this fake trial, Bugliosi became an aggressive opponent against the theory that JFK died as a result of a conspiracy. Bugliosi became devoted to the Oswald acted alone hypothesis. He spent over 20 years working on the exhaustive book intended to be the last word on the Kennedy assassination. Bugliosi's later-day literary battle to support the Warren Commission no conspiracy conclusion has led many JFK assassin researchers to accuse Bugliosi of being a government disinformation agent. In line of the mob's background in the Tate LaBianca murders, which Bugliosi's first book, Helter Skelter, did so much to conceal from view, his equally adamant refusal to allow the mob had something to do with the Kennedy hit in Dallas can only cause us again to wonder whose interest this man was really serving or had really been arguing for in 1970. As mentioned in the previous chapter, Lawrence Schiller, and I played his record and it got 5 views. Another zealous defender of the Warren Commission, played a crucial part in the early stages of the Tate LaBianca cover-up and in marketing of the form of yet another deceitful book. In the 1990s, those who have some idea of what Bugliosi really got up to, the Manson trial was assembled to see him. All the people self-righteously preached from the pulpit paid by the Manson trial about legal improprieties in other trials. Bugliosi criticized Kenneth Starr's prosecution of President Bill Clinton's as unfair demonization, a legal method Bugliosi himself had perfected in his treatment of Manson in Helter Skelter. Bugliosi was also moved to write a book critiquing the errors of prosecution team in the O.J. Simpson trial he made. Bugliosi, who made his career by harping on the completely irrelevant race war aspect of the Helter Skelter motive, was especially outraged by the defense playing the harmonious race card in the O.J. Simpson case. The full extent of the long-lasting danger of Bugliosi's infected with his promotion of Helter Skelter has been sufficiently realized. By concealing the truth, the murders were simply the routine result of a typical rivalry between drug dealers. Bugliosi's Helter Skelter cover story unleashed a nightmare in the national consciousness that lingers to this day. Through spreading the false idea that there was motiveless death cults lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on random victims, Bugliosi set off a tidal wave of paranoid fear in American society that was completely groundless. But the tangled web of deception Bugliosi wove led to consequences far more serious than inspiring false testimony, perjury, suppression of evidence, fear-mongering. The Teflon DA was never compelled to legally account for the mockery of justice he was responsible for in court during the Manson's trial decades ago. But through the helter-skelter lie at the center of Bugliosi's Manson myth is already proven to be lethal. Neil Edmonds' book, Manson in His Own Words. Manson is recorded as observing the media, film directors, and book authors, and took a molehill and made it into a mountain. The myth of Charles Manson was twisted more minds than I ever accused of touching. How many deranged minds have been twisted to commit acts of violence and murder by the helter-skelter cover story authored? Manson described getting many ignorant young convicts in prison who proudly told him what they had killed random rich victims, just like he supposedly ordered his family to do, in part of his helter-skelter plot. Manson had to disappoint these misguided souls. He informed them that they had only acted out a fictional scenario that Bugliosi invented. Manson stated that the mail he received over the years often includes letters from admirers who volunteered to kill for him. More often than not, these confused fans revealed that they got their erroneous ideas, what he wanted people to commit senseless slayings for him, directly from Vincent Bugliosi's book or the TV movie based on it. That the destructive effect of the devious helter-skelter myth Bugliosi crafted during the trial and popularized through his book went well beyond the courtroom is proven by at least one dramatic example, the Michael Draben case. Draben was sentenced to a prison sentence of 75 to 100 years for the brutal murder of Lincoln, Illinois family, completely unknown to him. According to the Tribune Wire Service news account, Draben testified in court that he was following the philosophy of the Charles Manson family, as outlined in the best-selling book Helter Skelter. He said the Manson family killed all those rich people, and I saw that if you killed them, that eases the problem. He said he chose his victims simply because they seemed wealthy and lived in a remote spot. Testimony at the trial showed that Draben continually played the record Helter Skelter in his home. Here we have a clear case of an impressionable psychopath committing multiple murder by faithfully following the false helter-skelter scenario Bugliosi created. Draben was particularly misidentified in the press as a Manson-style slayer. Typically journalistic inaccuracy, even Bugliosi didn't accuse Manson of slaying anyone. If the truth were known, Draben is more aptly described as a Bugliosi-style slayer. Helter Skelter did more than earn millions. Its access also splattered the blood of innocent victims on its ambitious author's hands. Tom O'Neill, in 2019's book Chaos, is perhaps most useful for its detailed revelation of just how many lies Bugliosi told, along with its first-hand account of the author's own personal conflict with the demented DA. Those of us in Manson's circle who observed the bug's methods for decades was not surprised to learn that the lying lawyer hilariously tried to smear O'Neill when he realized he'd uncovered unassailable proof of the courtroom malpractice. In a certain sense, Chaos is really more about O'Neill's personal battle with Bugliosi than with Manson, who was the author never met. Tom O'Neill never met Manson? I met him 3 times. Readers interested in a more detailed breakdown of all of Bugliosi's main misdeeds than are appropriated for this study of Manson are directly to the chaotic but often revelatory pages of Chaos. Does this all mean that the student of the Manson phenomenon should not read Helter Skelter? No, on the contrary. It's actually essential to read it so that you can understand with what gross abandon Bugliosi deceived the public. That's the end of that chapter. The next one's going to be about Sexy Sadie and Lawrence Schiller. So we're going to end today, as we usually do. We say thanks to the vinyl community and crime member families. And if you like my work at all, I would love to earn your subscription. God bless the children.